Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, before we begin, I would like to just let the sisters know if they would like to come onto the brother side. They're welcome to come here, inshallah, and sit here. That way they can also ask questions, inshallah, as well. But if I will also be speaking on the mic, so if they want to stay on the other side, you're also more than welcome to do that as well, inshallah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا بني إسرائيل اذكروا نعمتي التي أنعمت عليكم وأني فضلتكم على العالمين واتقوا يوما لا تجزي نفس عن نفس شيئا صدق الله العظيم. Inshallah, before we begin, does everyone remember what we talked about last week? Yes? No one took notes, so that's why I'm asking. It's a hint.
Overview of Bani Israel.
Good. Overview of Bani Israel. We talked about the family of Yaqub alayhi salam. The word Israel, according to Ibn Kathir, means the slave of Allah, right? So he's known as Abdullah, the slave of Allah. In the biblical books, it is said that he fought with the angel, and so it means the one who fought with an angel is the word Israel. But Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, he says we don't believe that prophets would fight with an angel, right? They are infallible, they're ma'soom. We don't believe this. So we take the opinion that the word Israel itself means the slave of Allah. Last week we talked about Yaqub alayhi salam, where he came from, and how he settled in Canaan. He settled in Canaan, which is near or the area of modern day Palestine, modern day Jerusalem. And from there he had 12 children, and then they moved to Egypt. And with Musa alayhi salam, they came back to the Canaan area, but they were not able to enter into Canaan because of their defiance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In today's talk, inshallah, by the way, I had two feedbacks from last week. Number one is to keep this under half an hour, which I think is almost impossible when you have so much history, and also to speak less. So I have 60 minutes of notes prepared, which I have to fit in 30 minutes, and also speak slower too, right? Which is almost impossible, but we'll try our best, inshallah. So I will skip a lot of details, but I will today, inshallah, what I plan to do is just go over a brief history of Bani Israel all the way until our Prophet ﷺ's time. Next week, inshallah, I plan to go over the stories of Bani Israel, which are mentioned in the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. There are many, many stories actually mentioned that our Prophet ﷺ would tell our companions, right? We know them, some of them we know, they're very famous. So for example, there is a story which talks about 3 people who were stuck in a cave. And the boulder came and it blocked the entrance of the cave. And so these 3 men, right inside, they were stuck. So they decided to make dua to Allah. And the first one said, "Oh Allah, you gave me an opportunity to commit zina, to commit adultery, but I refrained from it. And I did that only for your sake. Right? If you accept that deed of mine, please remove the boulder." And the boulder moved open a little. It's a famous story, I'm pretty sure. Many of you have heard it before, right? The second person, he made dua, right? That, "Oh Allah, I had this opportunity to earn haram, but I stayed away from haram," right? And so if I did that only for your sake, then remove the boulder a bit. And the boulder removed a little bit, but they were not able to pass through. And finally, when the third person made dua, the boulder removed enough that all 3 were able to come out safely. This is a story that's mentioned about the people of Bani Israel. There is another story mentioned about the man who, there were 3 men. One was a leper, one was a bald man, and one was a blind man. And an angel came and he blessed all of them. This is a very famous hadith. I don't want to get into the story right now. There are many other stories that are mentioned in the Quran and the hadith outside of the prophets. So we'll do that next week, inshallah. We'll also talk about the virtues of Bani Israel that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned and the Quran mentions. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Baqarah, He addresses Bani Israel. He says, "O Bani Israel, remember the many, many favors that I have bestowed upon you." And so Bani Israel had a few golden eras, right? A few golden areas where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showered them with immense blessings. Showered them with immense blessings and gave them power and izzah and glory in this world. But there were also times because of their defiance, right? There were people who were involved in magic, who changed the commandments of Allah, purposely changed the commandments of Allah. The Quran says they would sell the ayahs of Allah for their own gain. They would change the commandments so it could suit them, right? So one example of this is Yusha bin Nun, is after the time of Musa alayhi salam. There was a prophet by the name of Prophet Yusha, also known as Prophet Joshua. Musa alayhi salam, when he took Bani Israel out of Egypt and he brought them into the valley of Ti. He brought them into this valley. They stayed in this valley for 40 years because they refused to go into Jerusalem and fight the Canaanites, right? The people of Canaan who were staying in Jerusalem at that time. They refused. And the Quran says that they said to Musa, "You and your Lord go and fight. We will stay here, and when the war is done, call us, we will enter Jerusalem with you." Right? This is the defiance of Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was really upset. And so He made them wander around in this valley for 40 years. The hadith says that they would every day, wake up and they would be lost. They would find their way and they would get close to this Jerusalem area. And then they would set camp and they would think that the next day they would enter into Jerusalem. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it such that He removed them away to a faraway place. You'll notice when we talk about Bani Israel, there are many, many miracles, amazing miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? He put people to sleep for hundreds of years, He woke them back up, right? He was able to kill an army completely, right? Because of just one word. Right? He was able to take all of a large portion of Bani Israel's life away and bring them back to life multiple times, right? These are amazing miracles. Yet these people did not heed this lesson from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, did not pay attention to their prophets, did not listen to their prophets. And so this is why it was a result of their downfall. We'll talk about their downfall. But nonetheless, Yusha alayhi salam, when he entered into, so when Musa alayhi salam, while in this valley of Ti, he had also passed away. Right? It is said in the hadith, the Prophet says, when I was on my way to Jerusalem on the night journey, so I mounted the horse, the winged horse, and the angel and the horse took me to Jerusalem and I prayed there. But on the way there, I saw Musa alayhi salam's grave. It was right off the side of the road. It was right off the side of the road with the red soil on top of it. This is the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Musa alayhi salam himself, he passed away while in this valley. His successor were two prophets. There are two prophets, Prophet Yusha bin Nun, right? Prophet Joseph, and another prophet who is not mentioned in the Quran, Prophet Caleb. Prophet K-A-L-A-B, right? Prophet Caleb. These were two prophets. The Prophet ﷺ says, if Musa was like the sun to the shining sun to Bani Israel, Yusha was like the moon to Bani Israel. Meaning that he was a very, very respected prophet in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the greater prophets of Bani Israel, right? So when Yusha bin Nun, right, after Bani Israel went through all of this difficulty in the valley of Ti, they made tawbah, they asked Allah to forgive them, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I will open Jerusalem for you, but when you enter udkhulul bab sujjada faqulu hittatun naghfir lakum. The Quran says, enter into Jerusalem doing sajda. Udkhulul bab, enter the door while doing sajda, and say the words hitta. Hitta in Hebrew means, oh Allah, forgive me. It means forgiveness. Oh Allah, forgiveness, oh Allah. And Allah says, we will forgive all of your past mistakes, we will forgive them. And when Bani Israel went into, the hadith says, when Bani Israel went into Jerusalem, instead of doing sajda, they sat down on their behinds and they crawled into Jerusalem. And instead of saying the words hittatun, they changed it to hintatun. Hinta means, anyone know what hinta means? Wheat. Yes, Allah wants more food, right? There's a joke. When the Hajjaj go to, the people who have gone for Hajj, they will understand this, right? When the Hajjaj go to Mecca and Medina, they perform the Hajj, they do the talbiyah, labbaik Allahumma labbaik. But after the Hajj is over, they say albayk Allahumma albayk. Albayk is a famous restaurant in Medina, right? So they change the words from labbaik to albayk. This is what Bani Israel did, right? So this is what Bani Israel does. They change the wording, and this is their act of disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But nonetheless, Yusha bin Nun, he brings Bani Israel into Jerusalem and he conquers the Canaanites, right? He overtakes the Canaanites. This happens in the 12th century, and he establishes 12 different judges who rule over Bani Israel. I mentioned this last week. Moving onwards, in the 11th century of Bani Israel, so we're going to work our way from before Christ, 12th century before Christ, Yusha bin Nun, 11th century before Christ. There are two prophets that are mentioned in the Quran that came in the 11th century. One was Prophet Ilyas. وَإِنَّ إِلْيَاسَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِذْ قَالَ لِقَوْمِهِ أَتَدْعُونَ بَعْلًا وَتَذَرُونَ أَحْسَنَ الْخَالِقِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about the story of Ilyas alayhi salam. In the 11th century BCE, he says he was sent to a place called Ba'la Bakka, a city called Ba'la Bakka, and it is said that it is in the south of the Mesopotamian area, right? South of Babylon. This would be modern day, it would actually be an Arab country, but south of Iraq right now, south of modern day Iraq, right? And he was sent to this area, and he said to their people, why do you worship an idol and leave Ahsan al-Khaliqeen, the best of creator? And it is said he was also from amongst Bani Israel. So there were some Bani Israel who did not stay in Jerusalem, rather they migrated and they settled down in this area. And Ilyas alayhi salam came to them, and after Ilyas alayhi salam, Prophet Al-Yasa, right? His story is also mentioned in the Quran, just by name actually, not the story. It is also mentioned in the Quran. He also came after Ilyas alayhi salam into the city. And the reason why I mention this is because we'll study today that Bani Israel actually dispersed and had a diaspora like throughout many different areas. So if you study Bani Israel today, there are a lot of Jews, for example, in India. There are a lot of Jews in Morocco. There are a lot of Jews in all of Europe. There were a lot of Jews throughout Europe, right? How did they get there? We'll talk about that inshallah today, right? So this was a prophet. After Prophet Yusha and Prophet Ilyas, in the 10th century, we have Prophet Hizqeel alayhi salam. Prophet Hizqeel alayhi salam was a prophet who was sent to the city of Jerusalem, and it was the people of Jerusalem openly disobeyed him, right? And he came to warn the people to go back to the right path. In fact, the hadith says that Allah sent him a message to tell Bani Israel that, O Bani Israel, if you do not go back to worshipping one Allah, and do not go back to performing your rituals and practicing your faith, then I will send a punishment over you. I will send a punishment over you. But the people did not listen, and so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the Palestinians. These are a group of people who are modern day Syria area. They were originated from there, right? This is why that area is called Palestine itself, right? For us, because when the Roman Empire, much later during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, took over, or before the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when they took over the city of Jerusalem, they decided to change the name from Jerusalem to Palestine, because they wanted to remove the name of the Jews in that area. Right? So this name, Palestine, it actually originates much before the Canaanites. It actually originates in 2000 BC, a group of people who were known as the Palestinians who lived in modern-day Syria. And so they came, and with many different wars, they were able to take away the tabut from the Bani Israel. We know about this tabut. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in the Quran as well. That Bani Israel had this special box or a tabut, in which inside there was the stone with the commandments of Allah, the 10 commandments were written down, and there were also many other things, many possessions of Musa alayhi salam. And Bani Israel, whenever they would keep that tabut with them, they would have many blessings with them, and they would always win every war easily. And so, because of their defiance during the time of Prophet Hizqeel alayhi salam, right, this is 1000 BC roughly. 1000 BC, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took away this tabut, and these people, started being losing many different wars to the Palestinians, right, to the Palestine people. And it was at that time that Prophet Shamil alayhi salam came in the 990 BC. 990 BC. I'm going through this very, very quickly, but I just want to give you a brief summary of Bani Israel today, and inshallah then we'll talk about the virtues and the lessons that we learned. So Prophet Shamil alayhi salam then came around 990 BC, and during his time, at this time, all of Bani Israel, they were tired of this fighting. They made tawbah back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they begged Allah for forgiveness, and Allah forgave them. And they asked Prophet Shamil, why don't you ask Allah to assign upon us a king who will rule over us, unite us, and so we can overtake the Palestinian people. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Talut alayhi salam. Talut was a king, and he was a young man. He was 32 years old at that time when he became king. And he was a small farmer. I mentioned this last week. He was from the children of Binyamin, the youngest son of Yaqub alayhi salam. He was the tribe that was the youngest son of Yaqub alayhi salam. But nonetheless, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unites Bani Israel under this one king, and they have this war against the Palestinians, which is where Goliath, Jalut, is the leader of. And Dawood alayhi salam, as a young man, he goes and he kills Jalut. We mentioned this last week. It is at this time that Allah subhanahu, the people of Bani Israel became immensely thankful to Allah. The hadith says they were immensely thankful to Allah. They did not disobey Allah at all. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what did He do? He favored them even more by giving them extra favors, right? So they had favors during the time of Musa alayhi salam with man and salwa and all of these different things, right? But they defied. And so here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then took away all of their blessings, and now because of their victory over the Palastinis, they became even more thankful to Allah. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them with many other favors. Of these favors, number one is that He brought prophethood and kingdom together. So Prophet Dawood alayhi salam is the first person to be both prophet and king. No other person before was king and prophet together, right? This is a blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Bani Israel. Allah always sent them prophets later on, but the prophets were always separate than the kings, right? There were only two prophets from Bani Israel who were both prophet and king, and that was Dawood alayhi salam and his son Sulaiman alayhi salam. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them access to weaponry, and so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with wahi, told Dawood alayhi salam where to look for minerals, where to look for certain materials, and to extract them from the ground, and then to also mold them into weapons. So they became the military superpower of that time. This is 950 BC now. We're talking 950 BC. During the time of Talut, he decided to marry his daughter off to Prophet Dawood alayhi salam. When he passed away, Dawood alayhi salam became the king, right? And it is said about Dawood alayhi salam, he was one of the greatest prophets of Allah. He was a very skinny man, very tall person, and he had always worshipped Allah. He would always worship Allah. He had the most melodious voice. He would recite, and the Quran says that when he would recite, the birds would glorify Allah, and the mountains would glorify Allah with him, right? And there are two opinions as to what does this mean. Some say it means that the animals would talk, the mountains and the birds would talk, and read the Zabur with Dawood, and some say that they would, in their own language, do the tasbih and the glorification of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Moving onwards, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, during this battle between Talut and Jalut, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also returns this tabut back to them. Right? This is a promise from Allah in the Quran that if you unite under the king Talut, you will get this tabut, you will get this box back. فيه سكينة من ربكم وبقية مما ترك آل موسى وآل هارون تحمله الملائكة. The Quran says they will have peace and tranquility in it, and it will have many remnants of Musa alayhi salam and his family and his possessions, etc. And these were sources of blessings for them. After Dawood alayhi salam, then we had Sulaiman alayhi salam. Sulaiman alayhi salam's story is very, very interesting. I don't want to go into much more detail, but the Quran actually mentions his story in many, many different places. We know about, what do we know very quickly about Sulaiman alayhi salam? Yes, he did have 700 wives. This is established through a sahih hadith, right? He had 700 wives. It was allowed in his faith. He made dua to Allah for three things. Number one, oh Allah, give me such kingdom that no one else has ever gotten that kingdom before. And Allah blessed him with such a kingdom. It is said that he ruled over the entire area at that time, right? And the Jews were in military power, and Allah gave him control over the jinn. Allah gave him control over the animals. He could talk to animals. He could travel at the speed of wind. So he would be able to travel in one afternoon what it would take Bani Israel usually to travel 1 month. So he would spend a morning in Egypt and an afternoon in Jerusalem, right? For us, it's like a plane ride. But for them, it would be a 30-day journey, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for him. He would be able to travel at the speed of wind. He had many other gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. It is also him who also expanded the Baytul Maqdis. Right? We know from the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that it was Yaqub alayhi salam who had a dream. Allah commanded him to establish Baytul Maqdis in Jerusalem. So he did that, but Sulaiman alayhi salam then came and he built a palace around it, and he expanded this masjid. We call it a masjid, not a temple. It's called the Temple of Solomon today, but we believe it is a masjid. And actually you will see Jews, when they go there, they will cry at the western wall of this temple. And the reason for that is because they go and they beg Allah for forgiveness for all of the disobedience that Bani Israel has done in the past, right? We'll talk about that right now, inshallah, right after this. But nonetheless, Sulaiman alayhi salam, his story is mentioned, in many different places in the Quran. So first, the first story of his is mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested the people of Bani Israel by sending 2 angels down and teaching them magic, right? And then it is said in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that after Sulaiman alayhi salam passed away, the rumors began to spread that he controlled the jinn through magic. And they went to his throne, and they looked under his throne, and they saw some material, some writing. And so they confirmed their theories, and so they started saying evil things about Sulaiman alayhi salam. But the Quran says, وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانَ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا يُعَلِّمُونَ النَّاسَ السِّحْرَ. Right? It was not Sulaiman who did magic, it is not Sulaiman who disbelieved. And Allah equates black magic with kufr. Right? For us, in our faith, and in Bani Israel, black magic is impermissible. It is an act of kufr. It takes a person outside of Islam, even if they believe. If a person does magic, he has to repeat his kalima again. Right? I want you to understand. If a person goes into any magic, he has to repeat his kalima again. And so Allah says, وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانَ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا. It was the devils who were the ones who disbelieved. They taught everyone this sihr. And the Mufassir would say, until now, Bani Israel still practices this sihr, this magic. They are still practicing it. There are remnants of it. It's still found in their books, and their practices are still being acted upon until today, at the time of the writing of Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah. Right? But nonetheless, his kingdom, Sulaiman alayhi salam's kingdom, was very powerful. There was no, it was the jinn who built the magnificent masjid, or the temple of Solomon, and he had the jinn working for him. It is also said that he could hear ants up to 3 miles away. The story is mentioned in the Quran that he had assembled his army, and he took his army out marching. And he heard the ant from 3 miles away saying that, let's get out of the way before Sulaiman and his army crush us. And Sulaiman alayhi salam, he heard this and he smiled, right? And he thanked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he mentions that one of the favorite sayings of Sulaiman alayhi salam was, هَذَا مِنْ فَضْلِ رَبِّي. This is the blessing of my Lord. Every time he would have any blessing, he would say, this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was the most thankful of his, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's servants. But nonetheless, after Sulaiman alayhi salam passes away, Bani Israel resorts to magic and saying evil things about their prophets. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then again starts putting them into difficulty. What happens after Sulaiman alayhi salam? In the year 900 BC, Sulaiman alayhi salam passes away, and the next king who takes over, there's a difference of opinion as to what his name was, but the more authentic opinion was that his name was Rehoboam, right? And this is 990 BC, and it was during his time, right after Sulaiman alayhi salam's time, that the kingdom split into 2 parts. So we have the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. Judah is the name Yehuda, the oldest son of Yaqub alayhi salam. And so Sulaiman alayhi salam's empire splits into 2, and within a couple of years, the Assyrian empire from the north comes and attacks the northern kingdom because of the defiance of Bani Israel, and they lose control of this. And this is where Jews then disperse all over Europe. So now, if you know about, if you study Jewish history, you'll know that there are Jews in France who've been living there for thousands of years. There were Jews in Germany, right? And Jews in Great Britain, in Ireland, etc. Right? They were all coming from 800 BC. They started dispersing into different parts of Europe because their kingdom was taken over, the northern part. The southern part was the kingdom of Judah, which was still very well established, and it had a lot of power, and the Assyrian Empire was not able to take over this kingdom. But at this time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also separated prophethood and kingdom, right? So now no more prophets became kings, they only became prophets who would advise the kings. Bani Israel continued to have kings, but they did not have any prophets who were kings. It is said that the next prophet afterwards, in the year 700 BC, was the prophet Shay'a. His name is not mentioned in the Quran, but it is mentioned in biblical sources. Ibn Kathir says it's a reliable report, we can take it. He, at that time, advised his people to believe in Allah, and he advised the king. And the king at that time was a very righteous person, and he would listen to Prophet Shay'a alayhi salam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of the defiance of Bani Israel, sent an army from Babylon. So Babylon is, you're looking at where Ibrahim alayhi salam came from, right? So Babylon, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent an army from there, assassinated Persian army, but before the Persians became in power. So these were native people of that area before the Persians came into power. We know the Sassanid Empire came into power around 500 BC. So this is 200 years before that. There was a king by the name of Sanharib, and he brought his army to go and attack Jerusalem. And so this prophet and this king, they turn to Allah, they beg Allah all night, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I will extend your life for 15 years. He tells the king, I will extend your life for 15 years, I will cure you so you can make sure, I can bestow my favors upon Bani Israel. When they wake up, the entire army was already dead. When they wake up, the entire army was dead, except for a few people, 3 or 4 people, who Allah then commanded the Prophet to tell him, you go back to your land, tell them that we are the people of God, you cannot attack us, you cannot hurt us. Right? This is how Allah favored Bani Israel, that He killed a large army overnight, and no one knows the cause of it. Right? It said, some people say it's because of a plague, some people say it was because of chaos or eternal fighting, but no one really knows what was the cause of this. This is a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the south kingdom of Judah stays intact with this, and this king is killed. Only 5 people are left. They are sent back to Babylon. But people of Bani Israel then start disobeying Allah more. They become ungrateful to Allah. They do not listen to His commands. They make fun of the commandments of Allah. Right? They make fun of the commandments of Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in 580, He sends a army, a man by the name of Mukhtasar to go and conquer Jerusalem. It is said, and there were 3 conquerings of Jerusalem. By the way, the city of Jerusalem is the most fought over land in the world, in the history of the world. There's been over 5,000 wars in the land of Jerusalem. Over 50 different kingdoms have ruled over Jerusalem. Right? So it's the most bloodiest, has the most inhumane history if you look at it that way. Right? It's a very, very bloody area, very, very violent history of Jerusalem. It's centrally located, it's very blessed to every faith, and so everyone wanted power over it. Right? This was the land, even though the Persians and Mukhtasar himself, he had no value, he had no lineage or no link to this land. He wanted to take this land because it was centrally located. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him in Bani Israel. In Surah Al-Isra, Allah mentions the story of Bani Israel, how Allah tested them by wiping the whole city of Jerusalem out. What did Mukhtasar do? He took over the land, he killed 600,000 Jews, and he wiped the city of Jerusalem. There was no more Jerusalem left. Right? Ibn Kathir says it was actually a jungle full of wild animals because there was not a single human being living there. For 150 years, there was no human beings living there. Mukhtasar, he kicked all the Jews out, and he kicked all of Bani Israel out, and he raised the city completely to the ground. Right? This is the punishment of Allah. When it comes, this is how Allah disgraces people. 100 years before, they had Sulaiman alayhi salam, or 200 years before, they had Sulaiman alayhi salam, the greatest military superpower in the world. And now, because of the disobedience to Allah, what happens? Jerusalem is gone from them. Right? Jerusalem, their holy land is gone from them. Right? And this is at this time because the southern part of the kingdom of Sulaiman alayhi salam is broken. Many Jews travel to, or many people from Bani Israel will disperse. Many tribes of Bani Israel disperse. We have a lot of Jews nowadays are people from Bani Israel in India, and they came during the 500 BC. Right? In Kerala, there's over 4 million Jews actually right now in the southern city of India. Then there are people from Bani Israel all over North Africa. We have Jews who are in Morocco, in Mauritania. We have Jews in Libya, right? In Algeria, and then we also have Bani Israel in southern part of Africa. So we have Bani Israel, some of Bani Israel in Sudan or Ethiopia, right? And we also have some Bani Israel in Arabia, in Hijaz, in Medina, right? They come during this time, 500 BC. They come from Palestine land to Hijaz, and they wait there because they are waiting for a prophet of Allah. They come before Isa alayhi salam actually. So they come almost 1,000 years before our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was raised in Mecca. This is when they established themselves in Arabia. But who was Mukhtasar? Mukhtasar was the person who destroyed he destroyed Jerusalem completely, and he killed 600,000 of Bani Israel. He took many of them captives. He made them slaves, and this was the humiliation that Bani Israel received because of their defiance to Allah. But nonetheless, while they were in captivity, what happens? They turn back to Allah. Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends them another 2 prophets, Prophet Jeremiah or Jeremiah in Arabic, and Prophet Daniel alayhi salam. These are two prophets. The story of Prophet Daniel is actually very interesting because there is a hadith mentioned by a companion of the Prophet ﷺ. He says, Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, during his khilafah, this is much later, right, during the time of Umar radiallahu anh, after the Prophet ﷺ, he says that we were commanded to go and fight a war in Persia. So we went, we overtook this land, and we went there and we saw that there was a little area that they had decorated, a room or a little building that they had decorated. So we went inside and we saw this man holding a book, and he was preserved completely. His hair was still intact, his skin was intact, everything was intact. There was no decay on his body, no decomposing on his body. And we were amazed, who is this person that he has passed away? He has a book in his hand, and who is this person? So we asked the people, and they said, this is Daniel, who has been here for so many hundreds of years. And the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned in the hadith, he says, the Prophet's bodies never decay and never decompose. They're always protected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Umar radiallahu anhu, what does he do? He sends his general, he says, go and bring that book to me, and bring it. And Umar radiallahu anhu says, I read from it as if I read the Quran. It is commandments of Allah, it is words of advice, it is encouraging people to do good and believe in the hereafter. Very similar to the verses of the Quran. Umar radiallahu anhu says this in the hadith, and he goes, because of my fear that people will go and start worshipping him, or they will start into many different bid'ahs, Umar radiallahu anhu sends a team back to Persia, and he says, dig 13 different graves, various parts of the city, or during the night, and bury him in one, and close all of them. Do not let anyone know where his grave is. So we do not know, unfortunately, where Prophet Daniel's grave is, but we do know the story from authentic hadith, right, from authentic tradition of the seerah of history, that we were able to receive this book, see this book, and also see Prophet Daniel alayhi salam. Okay? But nonetheless, he came around 500 BC, and he was also in captivity along with Prophet Jeremiah. But Ibn Kathir says that there is a story in the Bible talking about Daniel and the lion's den. Has anyone heard it here? Yes? Okay. So it is said that the king threw Prophet Daniel into a den, or into a room, or into a cage with many different lions who were hungry, who hadn't eaten for days. And this was supposed to be his death, that the lions would tear him apart. But because he was a prophet of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved him, the lions did not touch him. Right? This was a miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is at that time, after Bukhtasar passes away, 150 years, there is no Jerusalem at all. The Jews are all over, and many of them are as slaves in Babylon, right? Where Bukhtasar comes from. He conquers Jerusalem, he goes back. And then at that time, the Sassanid Empire, the first king of the Sassanid Empire, overtakes Bukhtasar. Bukhtasar passes away, his son passes away, so Bukhtasar's grandson is in power, and he's overtaken by the Sassanid Empire, also known as King Cyrus the Great. Right? The reason why they call him King Cyrus the Great is because he overtook the Babylonian Empire, and he established the Persian Empire, and he also allowed all of Bani Israel to go back to Jerusalem and build their land again. So over 150 years passed by, there was no Jerusalem, and then around 380 BC, this is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows King Cyrus, puts it in King Cyrus' heart to allow Bani Israel all to go back to Jerusalem. They go back and they rebuild this city completely. Right? They rebuild the city, and this is why there is a story of a prophet of Allah. It is mentioned, the name of the prophet is not mentioned in the Quran, but the story is that he travels by Jerusalem, and he thinks to himself, this land is completely dead. How is Allah going to rebuild this land? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts him to sleep for 70 years. When he wakes up, he sees that half of Jerusalem has been built. And then Allah puts him back to sleep, and then when he wakes up again, the whole of Jerusalem has been built. So over 150 years, the entire city of Jerusalem is built again by Bani Israel, and they are in the protection of the Sassanid Empire, the Persian Empire, right? So we know that during the time of Isa alayhi salam, 30 years after Christ, the Roman Empire came and overtook the Sassanid Empire and overtook this land. But during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, this land was being fought over by both empires, right? The Quran mentions this, Allah mentions this during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. There was a war going on between the Persians and the Romans. And it was about this land, the same land of Jerusalem. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Rome has been defeated. Rome has been defeated, but do not worry, within a few years, Rome will come back. The Roman Empire will come back and defeat the Sassanid Empire. all the kuffar of Makkah, they started laughing at the Prophet ﷺ, that, how could that be? They just lost a war, a 100-year-old war. They lost it, and they're not going to be able to come back from it within a few years. Right? And then within a few years, within 9 years, the Roman Empire then overcame and took this land again. This land, Jerusalem, was fought over by both the Persians and the Sassanids. It was conquered by the Persians from the Babylonians in the year 380 BC. By King Cyrus, he allows Jerusalem to come back. Then at that time, there was also, while Bukh Nasr was there, when he destroyed all of Jerusalem, he also destroyed the Torah, so there was no more Torah left, right? And we know the story is mentioned in the Quran as well, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent amongst them a prophet Uzair or Prophet Ezra, and he had memorized the entire Torah by heart, and he knew where the Torah was. His father had hidden the Torah somewhere during the attack on Jerusalem, so no one knew where the Torah was except for him. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put him to sleep for 100 years. Okay, so he put him to sleep for 100 years. When he woke up, he was still the same age, but everyone had aged 100 years. So he went back to his hometown, and he saw that his maid was 114 years old. And he goes and tells her that I am Uzair, right? I am Uzair. And she doesn't believe it. She says, how could you be Uzair? He left him. He went missing. No one heard anything about him. And so to prove it, right, he goes to the city people, and he sees his own children, and his own children reject him. And they say, if you really are our father, then you are the only person who knows the Torah by heart. Why don't you recite it to us? So Uzair sits down underneath a tree, and he recites the entire Torah, verse by verse, and Bani Israel records it, and this is how they get the Torah back, right? And right after that, when Uzair passes away, Bani Israel, what does it say? What do they say about Uzair?
Said it is that
the son of Allah. Right? They said that the Yahud used to say that Uzair is the son of Allah. They make that claim that Uzair is the son of Allah. وقالت النصارى وقالت المسيح وقالت النصارى وقالت اليهود عزير ابن الله وقالت النصارى المسيح ابن الله. Right? And the Nasara will say, the Christian will say that Masih is the son of Allah. ذلك قولهم بأفواههم. The Quran says both of them, these are utmost lies. These are utmost lies. These are made up lies by the people. Right? Indeed, Allah does not have any children. Right? But this was Prophet Uzair alayhi salam. And so up until 120 BC roughly, this is the time between the rebuilding of Jerusalem up until the time of Zakaria alayhi salam. Ibn Kathir says we don't have much information of what happened in Jerusalem at that time, but very few people of Bani Israel actually came back and lived there. Many people had dispersed, and they are now living all over the globe, right? There is a tradition, in the biblical tradition, it said that during this time, 10 of the 12 tribes of Bani Israel have become lost. There are 10 out of 12 tribes of Bani Israel became lost. Actually, in 1948, when the kingdom, or when the country of Israel was made, right, the rabbi at that time announced that if you have Jewish lineage, you can come back, we can review your lineage. If you can prove to be amongst the 10 lost tribes, you are allowed to come back. Right? So many tribes actually went and proved their lineage of where they came from. And they were recognized as Jewish tribes, they were recognized as Bani Israel, and they were allowed to come back and settle in modern-day Israel. But some tribes were not allowed, right? Some tribes, their lineage was not established. We have Jews from Morocco, for example, and Jews from Ethiopia. They are not recognized by the state of Israel as actual Jews. In fact, you probably heard this in the news a couple of days ago, right? Netanyahu, what did he do? He kicked out all the Africans out of Israel, saying that they are not welcome here anymore, right? Because they don't have true Jewish heritage. This is what he said, right? But our history tells us that during the diaspora, during the removal of Bani Israel from their homeland, many of them went to different places, and it is established that they did go to Africa, they did go to Morocco and Ethiopia, right? But nonetheless, 120 BC comes, and this is the time of Zakaria alayhi salam. I will stop inshallah in about 2 to 3 more minutes. Zakaria alayhi salam was an old man, and he had a child, Yahya alayhi salam, and Bani Israel killed Yahya alayhi salam, right? The king at that time, he wanted a opinion, or he did something wrong, and Yahya alayhi salam was commanded by Allah to go and tell him what he was doing was wrong. He actually married his own sister, right? When the king at that time married his own sister, and he had a child with her. And Yahya alayhi salam tells the king that what you are doing is immoral and wrong, and the king goes and has Yahya alayhi salam killed. This was a defiance. They stopped listening to any of their prophets, And when Prophet Isa alayhi salam also came afterwards, they did not listen to Prophet Isa alayhi salam. In fact, what did they do? They told when the Romans came, they told the Roman Empire that this person is instigating propaganda against the government. And this is why the Roman Empire took Isa alayhi salam and they hanged him, or according to their history, they hanged him on the cross. According to us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took him back into the heavens. Right? After this, in 31 AD, which means 31 after Christ, which is during the time of Isa alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of the disobedience of Bani Israel to Yahya alayhi salam and to Isa alayhi salam, what does he do? He sends a Roman Empire. They come and they overtake Jerusalem, and it is said that they killed half of the residents of Bani Israel at that time in Jerusalem. And the city itself, right, they removed the name Jerusalem, they changed the name to Palestine. This is where they changed the name to Palestine, because they wanted to remove all, proof of this, all proof of of Bani Israel. And the Roman Empire also destroys the Temple of Solomon, or the Masjid of Sulaiman alayhi salam, again, except for one wall. So that wall is called the Western Wall, and this is where Jews will go, and they will hit their heads against the wall, they will cry and beg Allah for forgiveness, because it is the only wall that was standing since the time that Jerusalem was rebuilt. So we'll stop here. Next week, inshallah.
The Wailing Wall.
The Wailing Wall or the West Wall, both. Yes, there's known as both, exactly. You will see, if you go right now, if you can watch a video on YouTube, you'll see Jews go up there, they'll have a small Torah with them, they'll recite it, they'll hit their heads against the wall, they will cry. And they'll do this because of the disobedience they had to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They will ask Allah for forgiveness for everything and to establish Jerusalem back for them. Right? So we'll stop here, inshallah. Next week, we'll talk about Bani Israel from the Hadith, and there are many stories. The story of Rasisa, the story of Juraj, the story of the cave, the blind leper, the repentant kings. There are many different stories that are mentioned in the Hadith of the Prophet. The Hadith of the Prophet. So we'll talk about them, and then we'll talk about what were the blessings that Allah gave them and why. I just mentioned a few in detail, some of the defiances that they did, right? What type of defiance did they do exactly in detail? We'll mention those. We'll mention the reason, what type of favors exactly did Allah give them, and how and why did they defy Allah, and how did Allah punish them? I mentioned them in very brief, but we'll talk about more in detail, inshallah. And with that, I will open it up for any questions. If anyone has any questions, go ahead. And I did a very, very brief history. I'm sorry, I haven't been able to go into much detail.
Going back to Prophet Uzur, the one that they used to say that he was the son of Allah.
Going back to Prophet Uzur.
When he passed away, he was a good prophet, and the people then at that time, they had guidance. But when he passed away, they started building statues of him and started worshiping them statues. Yeah.
So yes, you're absolutely right. They started worshiping him, they started building statues for him. This was amongst the defiance of Allah after. This is why they called him the Son of God. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
Now, historically speaking, do the Jews actually have a claim, since we're talking about Bani Israel of being there like for thousands of years? Do now Jews actually have a claim to live there now?
Do the Jews actually have a claim to live there? Yes, they have a claim to live there. They have a claim to actually live in Palestine, but they do not have the right to rule over Palestine. That right has been taken away from them. It mentioned it in their books as well. Right? So do they have the right to live there? Of course, right? But they live in subjectivity under the rule of others. They are not allowed to rule a land anymore because of their disobedience to Allah. And this is what Orthodox Jews also believe. Right? So if you actually look at Orthodox Jews, they will tell you that we are not allowed to rule over Palestine, but they will live there, and it's a blessed land for them as well as for us. Right? This is why Jews have always lived there since the time of Umar radiallahu anhu. Since then, there's always been Jews there. In fact, one thing I forgot to mention is when the Roman Empire came in 31 AD, they destroyed again the city of Jerusalem. It was destroyed completely twice. Right? One during the time of Nasr in 580 BC, and one in the time of the Roman Empire. They destroyed it, and they made the masjid area, the Masjid of Sulaiman into a garbage dumpster. Right? It was Umar radiallahu anhu, when he overtook it, he cleaned that area up for them, and he made it back into the temple for the Jews to pray in. Right? This is established from the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the traditions from the rightly guided Khalifas.
So, what is this Zionism thing? with them over there in Israel.
What is the issue of Zionism, or the modern day Israel? So Zion is a concept where they believe, Jews believe, it's the opposite of the diaspora. The diaspora means the Jews are dispersing from their homeland. Zion means they're coming back to their homeland. So it's a concept where all Jews should come back to one area and they should stay together and they should rule that land. That land is theirs. But it's a concept that's not found in the Torah or the Bible or the Injil. It's
You know, a lot of the prophets came through that area that were not Israelite prophets. Like
True. Yes, a lot of
Shuaib, a lot of them,
I'm glad you mentioned this. So a lot of
a
prophets.
lot of them they're buried in Hebron, Palestine. A lot of them prophets, man.
I'm actually so glad you mentioned this. I forgot to mention this. Yes, there are many prophets who have come outside of Bani Israel to the same land. Prophet Ayyub alayhi salam, for example. Prophet Shu'aib alayhi salam, right? He's in the city of Madian, which is right underneath modern day Gaza, right? South of modern day Gaza. There's many prophets who are in that area, but they are not from Bani Israel. You're absolutely correct. Yes. So we'll stop here, inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah wa subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
So is this every day?
Every Saturday.
Oh, Saturday.
Every Saturday, yes.
Every Saturday.
My